Hello and welcome to today's video where I will be making a sketchbook. This is not a tutorial, this is just sort of a chill process video, I guess, of me making the sketchbook. It took like 2 hours, so it's not the full process. It's just sort of snippets. And I'm doing a voiceover right now and it's like 5 a.m. so I'm talking a little quietly, but I just want to make sure that, you know, if I did it later in the day, the upstairs neighbors might be making noise. They thankfully weren't making noise while I recorded this yesterday, this footage, so I'm able to keep some of the audio so you get some of those nice, like, unintentional ASMR vibes from the sounds of making it, and then I ruin it by talking over it. Actually, I like talking ASMR, but I don't think I have a voice for that, so. Anyway, today I'm going to talk about, kind of why I decided to make this sketchbook on a whim, and that's because I am struggling with my artistic identity, and I said that more dramatically than I needed to, because it's not that serious. It's just that I'm kind of feeling a little, like, lost or a little overwhelmed by, like, what I want to do with my art. I feel kind of like I've boxed myself into a certain extent, and I don't even know, like, who I am and what I want to make anymore. And I think that's kind of why I've been struggling to make art the past few weeks. And struggling to make art, like, I've been making stuff like every day, almost every day for, the past month or more, even though, like, I feel very art blocked because I have the motivation and the desire to make stuff. I'm just struggling with inspiration and just, I guess, confidence to some extent. But the thing is, I feel like I've kind of kept my different art styles and art passions somewhat separate, and you might think, if you've, watched my other videos, or if you follow me on Instagram and I post, like, paper crafting things, and I post embroidery, and I post, like, all sorts of things, you might think, I share all my different art and creative interests in one place, like, whatever. But I actually do separate some things. So, like, I have, like, cutesy kind of illustration things will be on my main account and in my shop and stuff like that. But, like, character art, I usually only do fan art, and I do it on a separate account. And so I have, like, kind of a different style for that, and I feel like it doesn't fit with my, main art style. But then I have other things that I want to do. Like, I really want to, like, I like doing landscape sketches. I'm not even that big into landscape as a subject matter. I just really enjoy doing, like, sketches and paintings of landscapes. I think it's because back in the summer I binge watched, like, all of Sandy Hester's videos, and I just wanted to, like, do that. And now I'm like, I want to do, like, big landscape paintings and, like, make them a little fantastical, a little weird, but I feel kind of like, well, I can't do that because it's not, like, a cute tiny little gouache painting of a corgi or something, I don't know why I do these things to myself with these, like, rules. But then lately I've been watching a lot of Arlie Beans. That's their YouTube channel, is Arlie Bean. A lot of their videos, and they do these sort of, like, surreal portraits in watercolor and gouache. And I absolutely love that. And while I don't want to do exactly that, like, that's not who I am, but at the same time, there's kind of part of me that's like, well, why can't I do sort of, like, emotional portraits? Like, why do all my figures that I draw or paint or whatever pretty much are usually just fan art? Because I feel like I have to do characters and not just, like, figures with a, like, I guess I feel like I don't do art that means anything. And that's kind of, like, I've been okay with that. But now it's like, what if I wanted to make art that means something? And I feel like I just can't take myself seriously enough to do that. And I think it's just embarrassment. I think I'm, like, embarrassed about what kinds of things I might try to say with my art if I tried to say something with my art. And that's kind of a weird place to be in, because it's like, I mean, I think there's some people who kind of look down on art that doesn't have a meaning, that is just, cute. But I feel like that's like my safe space, right? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I've never really felt like I needed my art to say something more than just like, hey, look at this cute little pig, or look at this funky looking armchair, or whatever. And I mean, I kind of got off on a tangent here, because whether or not I want my art to say something, I think is something I have to experiment with over time. And that's kind of what led me to, the decision that eventually led me to make this sketchbook. So what I kind of decided is that I want to practice more, which, I mean, obviously, like, that should be the most obvious answer to any artist that wants to like develop a skill or develop their style or anything, is like practice more. But I want to practice more like intentionally, because again, I can be all over the place. I can do like, character art for a couple weeks, and then I can do landscapes for a couple weeks, and then I can do cutesy stuff, and it's just like I don't really make a lot of progress in anything. And I mean, I think that's fine, and I don't want to stifle my, creative whims, because that's where the fun stuff comes from. But I think that I also want to gain some like confidence in my abilities to do certain things. So I've decided that I'm going to practice portraits. And the way I'm doing that is I decided last minute to join in with the 100-day project, and by last minute I mean the day after it started, I think. So it's like I started a bit late, so I'll finish a bit late, but that's okay. And like just one day late, so it's not that big a deal. And I'm going to do at least one portrait a day for those 100 days. I mean, that's the intention. I'm not going to be too hard on myself if I skip a day or something. Like, I don't think that punishing myself for, having flaws is helpful or productive in any way. So it's like, if I can't do a day, because sometimes my like health, mental health, whatever, is just not in a place to do art at all, and I need to respect that. But still, I want to focus on portraits for 100 days, and I'm hoping that in that process, I'll kind of gain more confidence in, drawing faces, drawing portraits, figures, whatever, but also just somewhat find like a style that I want to explore more, or that feels, true to my style, whatever that is. I mean, I don't have one art style, but still, like, there are some things that feel like me and some things that don't, and I want to find a way to do things that feel like me, that I can like do confidently. And I think that just has to come with time, right? So my intention, well, what I've been doing is I've been doing the 100 heads challenge that people were doing ages ago, that I was always too scared to try, where you do 100 heads in 10 days. And that's what I'm doing. I'm doing 100 heads in 10 days. I'm not spreading it out over the 100 days, because I'm just doing quick, like 5-minute sketches where I can't erase. Like, I'm using a pencil, but I'm not allowing myself to erase at all. And I'm just sort of going with it. And I'm finding all these like weird little quirks that I would have erased, or I would have, hit undo if I was doing it digitally. So it's been kind of interesting to see like what stylistic choices get made if I just allow myself to make mistakes and keep them. So I thought that would be a good exercise to kind of kick off this project. And then for the rest of the 100 days after that, I'm going to do like at least one portrait a day, either a quick sketch or a full painting. And so my plan is to do probably mostly with gouache. I got some jelly gouache just so I can like feel a bit more free to like use a lot of paint and experiment, and not feel precious about like my Holbein artist gouache. I mean, I could use acrylic gouache, but again, I want the blendability of the regular gouache, which is a thing I've been getting into. So like that would be in like a mixed media sketchbook that, you know, it's fine. I don't need like the fanciest paper for that or whatever. Not that this is fancy paper, but it's decent paper. But for this one, if I want to do some of them in watercolor, because that's something I'd like to practice and experiment with as well, I thought having a watercolor sketchbook for that would be useful. And I wanted something large, like this is 7.5 by 11, and I wanted something like that large so that I can, you know, focus on like larger brush strokes and things like that and not get too hung up on tiny details or worry about losing details, I guess. And I'm like, I could have done these on loose sheets of paper, but then I would have felt too precious about it. I would have felt like it has to be good because it's, you know, standalone. It has to be able to be a real art, you know? And I mean, that's kind of silly, but at the same time, if putting it in a sketchbook makes me more comfortable using it and more comfortable to play around and experiment, which is the whole point of this, then why not put it in a sketchbook? And then they're also like all together, and I can have kind of a record of this project in just like a couple different sketchbooks as opposed to scattered all over the place. So that was basically the inspiration for this sketchbook. And I mean, to some extent, it was procrastination, you know, that kind of productive procrastination, because there was part of me like, well, I should just start practicing, you know, painting some portraits now, even though I'm not done the 100 heads sketches. Which, I mean, I don't have to, I mean, I don't know why I feel like I have to do it all right now. I mean, I have 100 days, I don't have to rush it. But there was also part of me feeling like, well, if I wasn't spending the entire day working on this project, then I wasn't being, you know, as productive as I could be with regards to this project. So this kind of felt like a way for me to work on this project without doing anything quite so scary as, you know, painting a portrait. Which, I mean, I have done a couple in the past couple weeks. I've done some portrait paintings, which is kind of why I know that I want to get better at it. Because they didn't really go that well. I've posted some of them on Instagram, and even though I'm not, you know, super happy with them, because I feel like they're learning experiences, they're part of my journey, and I want to be, you know, pretty open about that stuff, and also be like, look, not everything in your sketchbook has to be a masterpiece, you know, or like not every time you attempt to do something has to be good. You still, you know, learn things from it, and I still like improve over time. And I'm hoping that's what I'll see by doing this for such an extended time. Like, I have done the 100-day project in the past, a couple of years ago, where I did an armchair every day. Now, those only took me like half an hour a day or something, so it wasn't a huge commitment, whereas for these I'm expecting to spend like at least an hour a day probably. Like, so far I've been doing 8 to 12 heads per day, and that takes me an hour to an hour and a half. Because I'm doing them really quickly. Like, some people I know would spend like 20 minutes on each head, and I'm spending less than 5. But I really just want to get as many heads drawn as possible so I can get more comfortable with it and comfortable doing it quickly and confidently and not feeling like I need to fix everything, because sometimes those little imperfections are what make it interesting. And I think that's the other thing, is that by limiting myself to doing character art that was just like fan art, or just like, you know, the like pretty girl art or whatever, is that you're kind of like, it kind of has to look good, you know, like it doesn't look right if it looks ugly, you know? Whereas, and I'm using ugly in quotation marks, by the way, but like, I feel like if you're doing, you know, a portrait as art as opposed to as, you know, making a pretty girl because people like art of pretty girls, then it can be more like interesting. Not that like pretty girl art is not interesting or is bad or anything, but I think that like it generally has to be more aesthetically pleasing, when I think that some of these like kind of wonky facial features that I've been drawing are like really intriguing and give them personality. Like they don't look like the references. Like the references are often models and stuff, and they don't necessarily look like that. Although what I do appreciate about the 100 Heads challenge is there's a lot of reference photos that are like sculptures of grumpy old men, which everyone says are their favorite to draw, and I agree. I agree that those are the most fun. They were the most scary to me because it's so far outside of what I would normally draw, as mostly drawing pretty girls and fan art. But they're so much fun, and they're so forgiving because like they're, you know, like any imperfections just kind of look like part of their like really like, you know, their personality and stuff. So I've been having fun with that, but I'm also looking forward to moving on to doing more complete paintings and stuff, even though I'm scared. So it's that kind of balance of being like scared to get started but also eager to get started, and I'm just trying to like keep up the momentum, I guess. And I think that starting with these like quick sketches was a good way to get started without feeling too overwhelmed by like, oh, I have to make, you know, a good painting on day 1. Like I don't have to make a good painting on day 100. Like the point of this is not to make a good painting. The point of this is just to practice and experiment, and like again, that's the beauty of having it in a sketchbook, is I can do whatever. And I mean, I don't have to show anyone if I don't want to, but I also think that like there's value in sharing the process. There's value in sharing the experimentation and the play and the learning experience, because I mean, it's how we learn from each other. It's that kind of like the flaws that make us human and vulnerable and like relatable to each other. Like I think that mistakes in art, again in quotation marks, are really important to just like connect with people. And so I'm trying to embrace that a bit more, and like people have been liking my sketches, and even when like I say stuff like, oh, I don't really like how these turned out, but whatever, in my like Instagram posts, and there's people who'd be like, oh, these are great, because I think that they can see things more as stylistic choices that I might see as mistakes. And that's kind of the beauty of like, you know, non-realism is that things can look quote unquote wrong but still look good or interesting or like inspiring in some way. I don't know if I got off on too much of a tangent here, but look, I finished binding the sketchbook, and I'm going to show you here kind of how big it is. Like I said, it's 7.5 by 11, and I'm going to put a smaller sketchbook next to it after I flip through it, apparently. I forgot about that. I also forgot to like tuck in the ends where I restarted the thread, so I have to go back and do that. But I didn't notice that until I'd like edited this footage, so. But yeah, it's like, it's a pretty big one. That's like my A5-ish sketchbook, so you can see how much bigger it is than that one. And right next to it, I'm putting the first watercolor sketchbook I made a few years ago when I didn't have any of the like proper bookbinding supplies. And you can see it's a little wonky. Like the cover just moves a lot because I didn't have waxed thread, I didn't have curved needles, I didn't have all these things that make it so much easier to get a more tight binding. But that's, again, this isn't a tutorial, so I'm not going to go into that. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my rambling and the process of this, sketchbook. Anyway, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.